Right. We're live for office hours and gonna wait for Geraldine has arrived. Geraldine, feel free to shoot a question if you have one. Um, while I'm waiting, gonna show you guys one, two, three, four, five of these paperback books that are now available out of 16. They're all done. This, as an example, is the whole first three steps. Oh, there we go. The whole first three steps of human courtship, making the first phase of courtship sexual attraction. Uses a lot of evolutionary psychology. Here's a table of contents. It's nice color printed paperback. And I like the font a lot. This particular one, the first three steps, take up over 400 pages in this book. But they are now more affordable. Here's step 4 out of 9. That's an author's copy. Step 5. And this has, well, over 200 pages. Step 6. A little bit shorter. It's less than 200 pages. It's about personality style matching in relationships. Jump all the way to volume 1 of step 7. Step 7, 8, and 9 are very long. 7 and 8 each are at least well over 1,000 pages, or like 1,500 pages. So they come in volume 1, 2, 3, and 4 for step 7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for step 8. Because we're getting into the cerebral cortex there. We're getting into the higher brain, and who am I? What is my identity before I get into a relationship? And that's volume 1 out of 4. Just for step 7 is over 400 pages. So, but it's full of diagrams. There's thousands of psychology diagrams in here and fine art. So I just thought I would share that with you, that after 15 years or so, I have completed this entire system of human courtship that I call romantic dynamics. See, that's just 5 out of 16 volumes. And I prefer the paperback ones because their dimensions, they're 8 by 5, so it's 2 columns of text per page, and they're so small you can fit them in a knapsack or a purse. So pretty cool. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Those are on Amazon, available on Amazon, just by searching for the Romantic Dynamics series. So let's see. Geraldine, this is office hours, so I'm going to respond to what you text me or type on the page, which I see. And Geraldine says, I'm going to start purchasing with number 9. Oh, step 9. Okay, 9 of 9. That's a good one. I like step 9 a lot. Kind of wraps everything up together and ends with a lot of film. We use a lot of myth, literature, even novels. Shakespeare, the master of emotions. We go through a lot of Shakespeare in steps 5, 6, or I'm sorry, 4, 5, and 6 for the emotional attraction phase of courtship. And then we get into a lot of films in steps 7, 8, and 9. And I relied on such films once we get up to step 9. I relied on films like Closer with Julia Roberts and Jude Law, Clive Owen, Natalie Portman, um, Midnight in Paris, Woody Allen films. I used a few of those. Match Point, I used in steps 1, 2, and 3, actually. And then Midnight in Paris is really illustrative of some warning signs in step 9. So Geraldine says, perhaps I start with step 7, volume 1. Yeah. Way back in the day, I wrote a personal growth compendium I called Mind OS, Operating System of the Human Mind. And it was like a simplified way of looking at the psychologies as a synthesis, um, kind of a unification theory of psychology, if you will, for personal growth. That was back in the day when it was self-help books were out there. Aramis, thanks for being here. Yeah, still at it. Took about a 10-year break, a decade-long break to do research and write 16 books. These are 5, 2 to 400 pages each, covering all of human courtship with hundreds and hundreds of research references correlating to the research. I thought it would be quite important to just not speak off the cuff what I think is scientifically true, but reference research as it comes out. And research only started exploding in the 1990s on human courtship. I mean, there were things about marriage, some things, and zero about dating or single people. But now we are a majority single society, sadly. So thanks, Aramis. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He recalls Mind OS. Um, Back to that. Step 7. I should probably list what the titles of the steps are, just by way of review. I'll do that in a moment. But step 7 is titled "Who Am I?" Now, if you're going to get into a partnership, not just a dating situation, a situationship, a temporary thing, but a partnership, you better know who you are and what you like, what you don't like, what your goals are, what you want, what you can invest in another person, what kind of other person you're looking for is in part based on knowing who you are. So I actually took all of Mind OS from way back in the day and turned it into step 7 and called it Who Am I? So really, step 7 is so long, it's 4 volumes of about 400 pages each. So that's 1,600 pages. It's a personal growth program, if you will. It's a unification model of the conscious mind and the emotions too, for working just on yourself and knowing yourself well, knowing what your assets and liabilities are in your psychology and what your psychological resources are and how they all work together. So things like self-esteem, what is that? There are 2 types of it. 2 types of stress impinge on your self-esteem. There's the importance of the personal boundary. There's the idea of consciousness itself or mindfulness. Um, the aspect that we all call authenticity, or clarity of mind. Observing ego is what Freud called it, Freud and successors. So there are all these working parts of an individual's psychology, but what took 16 volumes of 2 to 400 pages each to cover human courtship was the dynamics between 2 people, so much more complex than just looking at one person's individual psychology. And yet your individual psychology obviously is going to factor into how courtship works out for you. So I should respond to Aramis since there's an early question here, and then I'll list the titles of the steps of courtship as I view them to you next. Aramis writes, I wrote to you on Facebook back in the day. You wrote an article on Barack Obama in Psychology Today. Also, The Secret Psychology of How We Fall in Love. That was my first book. I swore I would publish with a major publisher before age 40, and I made it by 1 month. I was 39 years old. Loved it. Super looking forward to your work. Hope you're well. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I shouldn't assume you're male. I don't know what you are, but your name is interesting, um, and kind of Greek sounding, ancient Greek. So thanks for being here. Peter joined, Michael joined. That's great. Um, Old fan from 2004, 2005. Wow, that's great. Well, I'm glad you're on the list and got this message. So, okay, yeah, well, feel free to text a question or something you want me to answer. I might be joined by an esteemed colleague, Jeremy Fox, who's just a really gifted psychotherapist and trauma specialist. Should have a PhD, actually. Hope he's not listening right now. Very bright guy. I've done a lot of podcasts with him. Let's see. Before I go there, Michael says, hey, great work on the compatibility virtues. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's something new that I came up with. It. Those of you that were clients way back in the day, customers, um, I took 10 years off to write these 5,000 plus pages and publish them. And one of the things that was very underdeveloped at the time, maybe I had to do a lot of personal learning myself, being in a marriage, to learn about step 7, 8, and 9. Step 8, which I'm going to list them in order, I promise. I'll get to it. But step 8 is who we are. So step 7, 8, and 9 are intellectual attraction, or we all call it partnership. They are what used to hopefully occur in what was called engagement to be married, where you were thinking about yourself, what you want, thinking about your potential partner, getting closer with each other, getting really deep, into planning your future, what would that look like? And I call that intellectual attraction, because it's conscious, it's purposeful. A partnership is a purposeful investment of resources by you both, um, strategizing together. Um, the, they used to be called the 3 C's, but I added a fourth C. The 3 C's classically from couples counseling were called communication, collaboration, and compromise, in that order. I think the correct order is communication, compromise, then collaboration is taking action. It's executing on your joint plans. But I added a fourth C at the beginning, curiosity, because I realized if you're an uncurious person, which you're not if you're here, but if you pair up with somebody who's kind of uncurious about how the mind works, how their own mind works, how your mind works, I mean, what's the point of communicating? Nothing's going to get accomplished, and there is a chance you're with a narcissistic person, far more narcissistic than you if they're uncurious. So, uh, starting with that, I did a whole lot more thinking about steps 7, 8, and 9. 7 is inquiry about, what your makeup is. Who am I? Step 8 is who are we? And then step 9 is where are we going? Step 9 is, okay, we're going to officially become partners and we're going to start a life together. But 8 is uh, the biggest of the 9 steps as far as volume of content, in part because I had to develop a whole technology for explaining not personality matching exactly, not sexual compatibility, you know, polar um, passionate energies. That's easy. That's easy for anybody to understand. But compatibility of character, and character is a wild and woolly beast. It's a huge concept, a major topic for most of the ancient philosophers, wondering what is a good person, a person with virtues. And you see the idea of the virtues revivified as you go through the history of science, all the way up to the current day, where we have what is called positive psychology, which by Martin Seligman, the researcher who discovered learned helplessness in depression, and then from there became the grandfather of positive psychology. The idea that there's more than just pathology psychologically. There's growth and there's expansion and evolution of who we are. So why not look at the positive side of the spectrum too? But a lot of what positive psychology gets into is virtues, are virtues to try to inculcate in yourself and obtain. And guess what? Those virtues are the very same ones that are talked about by George Vaillant, the psychoanalyst who studied um, ego defenses, defense mechanisms, you have heard them called. It's the same thing. At least the mature ego defenses are the human virtues. But Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Epictetus, they all looked at the Stoics. They all looked at not that they're all Stoics, but the Stoic philosophers, in addition, they all looked at what is a good person, what is human virtue, and you're well acquainted with virtues like um, humor, temperance, tolerance, courage, um, kindness, loving kindness, generosity, altruism. These are all virtues, and that's a lot of what positive psychology talks about wanting to attain. Whether it has decoded what are the working parts of generosity, what are the working parts of tolerance, that I don't think that has been done. But we try to do that in this step 8. We look at the virtues, and what I did is I compared 4 learned skills that are classic to couples counseling, beginning with the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and compromise. Or I place it as 4 C's now: curiosity, communication, compromise, then collaboration. You got to have the first one before you get to the second one, then to the third one, then to the fourth one. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So these are learned skills, which ought to give us a lot of hope, because even if you're not well matched with a person, but you know you love them and you're attracted to them and you're walking down the aisle, you're going to do it. You want to do the best with what you've got. Nobody's perfect, and you don't have eternity to find the perfect match for yourself. So nobody's perfectly matched in marriage or partnership. So it gives me hope, and it ought to give you hope and everybody hope that there is such a thing as learned skills that anybody can work on and improve their relationship. So those are the 4 C's, I call them. But there are also 4 compatibilities that are pretty immutable. You're kind of either born with them or destined for them. Number 1 is intelligence, your IQ level. We tend to pair up with those who are kind of similar IQ to our own. So imagine you're a gifted person, you're a 130, 140 IQ person. What are your chances of finding a mate? Extra difficult, if this matters, this kind of compatibility, because you got to find somebody similar to you. Um, Second one is maturity level, right? We're all on a continuum, we're all growing all the time, but at this point in time, the point at which we are deciding on becoming partners, how mature are we? We tend to pair up with those of similar maturity level to ourselves. Developmental level, it's the idea that on the inside, how old are you? Are you 40 years old, but on the inside you're 18, or you're 26, or you're 38, or you're an old soul, you're 50 on the inside. We all have a different sort of speed of development regardless of our chronological age, and we pair up with those who are kind of similar in maturity level. So that's the second one. The third one you're real familiar with because all the early dating sites relied completely only on this. It is shared beliefs and values. You know, what kind of music do you like? What are your politics? What is your religion? What do we have in common in values and what we believe in? So that one's obvious. But we do pair up largely according to that. And then the last one is kind of obvious, but it's easy to miss. It's, do we share some kind of compatibility of future lifelong goals? Like, why was I put here on the planet? It wasn't just to marry, it wasn't just to have children. There was something more to it. Um, Males tend to like calling that a mission in life, although people are on a bell curve, so who knows? But males tend to like to call that a mission. Females tend to like to call it a purpose, life's purpose or life's mission, whatever that may be. It's not exactly contingent on a specific other person. It's what you would do by yourself. It's what you would do in a partnership, but it's what your life is to be all about. And there has to be some kind of compatibility there. An example, you would see a lot of Hollywood actors divorce. They marry each other. Two actors marry. They do the same career. So there's built-in potential competition there. If one or the other or both have quite a bit of narcissism, then there's huge competition, and somebody's getting broken up with eventually when the other person's star rises. You see that all the time, right? And part of it is that they naturally, of course, met somebody because of what they do for a living in the same field. Maybe they were in a love scene together, for example, or they were the stars in a movie together. But then it eventually falls apart because this life's mission and life's purpose thing, they're they're both doing the same thing. So what do they offer each other? And then you see after the Hollywood divorce, the the next spouse is a comedian while she is a serious actor. Okay, so they're both in acting, but one is a comedian, totally different style of acting. Or one is a finance person with a Hollywood studio, or they're an agent. They're not an actor. So the agent pairs up with the actor, for example. Same ballpark, same industry perhaps, but totally different functions and tasks, but with maybe compatible life goals and skill sets to join together as a quote power couple, right? We hear that phrase. So anyway, I say all that because that's the fourth of four compatibilities: IQ, um, maturity level, beliefs and values, which are a similar thing, and then life's goals. Those are kind of immutable. You were meant for them. You can't like vastly alter any of those. Um, so that's the downside, is you got to think ahead when you're dating somebody, pairing up with somebody, that you're going to be compatible in these four ways, because you can't really change a lot about that. So now what do we have? We have four learned skills for couples in step 8. We have four immutable traits of compatibility in step 8. 4 times 4, let's combine. Now we have 16. And what are these 16 things? I came up with the closest to a match of, well, let's say intellect plus um, curiosity. Intellect plus curiosity. What's the name of a virtue that really embodies the immutable trait of intellect compatibility with the learned skill of curiosity? Scholarliness, right? I like that one. It's the first in the list of 16. 4 times 4 is 16. But scholarliness is something I like about myself, and I have dated people who don't really care about that, and there's something missing. there was something missing in such relationships, and then they didn't work out. So it's an example of how compatible are you in character virtues. What are your best features you bring to the table? It's the kind of thing you would see in the movie When Harry Met Sally, when there are these old couples they interview, and the one spouse says, "Oh, I always loved this about him. He's so humorous. I always loved that about her. She keeps me in line." Well, these are just ordinary phraseology for virtues that are most admired in the other person. And part of what they're admired for is because they're not the best gift of the one admiring them. Yet, as a couple, if we can bring as many of these 16, what I call cardinal virtues of partnership, to bear, it's very stabilizing for the partnership. Okay. So that's what all that's about. That's step 8. That's why it's so big, because we cover all 16 of these cardinal virtues. And then one thing I love about Aristotle is the idea of the Aristotelian golden mean, the idea that for every virtue, there's not one but two vices. There's a vice of deficit, which is obvious. If you're lacking in the virtue of courage, then that's cowardice, and that's a vice. But there's also a vice of excess, according to Aristotle, vice of deficit and a vice of excess. So it's saying we need to find balance on a spectrum. It's almost being able to call psychology a quantum psychology, where there's a spectrum, but there are points on a spectrum that respect individuality. And yet the zones of a spectrum give us labels, and we have to label things in science if we're going to do anything helpful. So that's quantum. So Aristotle was kind of a quantum psychologist, if you will, by saying for every virtue, there are two vices, deficit and excess. What's the excess of courage? I would use the word foolhardy. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Foolhardiness is too much courage. See? So we go into all that in this step 8 of 9. It'd be easy to say it's overkill to write so much about human courtship, but the fact that it exists as 16 books is great and enjoyable as reads, but they're also the exact same content that is on the site that those of you who are upgraded members have access to, which is romantopedia.com. And there, everything is cross-referenced. And so if you have a question, there's actually virtual advisors, AI style advisors in there that are, robots. And you ask a question and it'll narrow you down to just one web page that answers your question out of 5,000 plus. So there's that. Yeah. So it's a lot of writing, but it doesn't mean you have to read it every word to understand the system. You can just play with romantopedia.com as well. Okay, let me see if there are any other questions. Wow, Chris Yabsley. Great. Thank you. Good to have you here. All right, so Aramis says, what are your thoughts on Sternberg's theory of love, passion plus intimacy plus commitment? And how does it compare to your Romantopedia model? Apologies in advance. I recall your love of the Count of Monte Cristo film, which is especially a hero's journey, really highlighted, especially for males, Count of Monte Cristo. Okay, so yeah, Sternberg's theory of love. I wish Jeremy would hop on. He's very knowledgeable about older theories. Passion plus intimacy plus commitment. Yeah, I mean, any model like that, I mean, a model like that is going to appeal to the public because it's simple and it is inclusive of actual operative principles that are going to help or work, hopefully work. So that's good. But any model like that, I suspect, is gonna fit somewhere in the model that I am espousing as well. And part of the reason for that is really the master model of models I have come to the conclusion of in psychology is the triune brain model. I mean, it's the best model for covering everything because this reptilian, mammalian, and higher brained idea, although it's not true anatomically or in the circuitry of the brain exactly, it's an explanation of the evolutionary psychologist's concept that software runs on the hardware of the brain. It's like software packages. So, what would the three master software packages be that subsume everything else? It would be the unconscious. This is Freud too, really. The triune brain is also Freud in a way, because Freud talked about unconscious, preconscious, and conscious. Then he revised it to be id, ego, superego. Three parts. It's really talking about the same things. The unconscious instincts are evolved in us. We cannot think them away. We certainly can't culturally enrich them away. We are animals, and they are the instincts that preserve our genetic line. Otherwise, we would have gone extinct as a species. So there's the unconscious and the instincts. But then clearly, like all mammals, we have emotions, and love is based on these, the concept of love. Love is differentiated from passion, which you mentioned in the Sternberg model, and love as differentiated from partnership, which is a conscious set of decisions and strategies and planning and hard work, perhaps, usually, that isn't necessarily always enjoyable or maybe even ever enjoyable um, for a lot of folks, but it's conscious. It's the higher brain. It's executive function operating when two people partner up and join. So Sternberg has basically the same thing. The Sternberg model, in your way of simplifying it, it's great the way he wrote it. Passion is reptilian brained. It's instinctual. I talk about that through this whole book, The Romantic Dynamics of Sexual Attraction, Steps 1, 2, and 3 of Human Courtship, 400 pages. That's passion. Um, my way of, and you'll see how this is subsumed in my model. Um, Passion, as far as I can tell, has only been used in one of two ways throughout literature and linguistics. It's either used in the common way we all know, which is to denote sexual interest and alignment and activity, um, um, the sexual passions, or it's used in a broader way on issues of life and death. For example, my life's passion is playing music, or my life's passion is art, and or being a my life's passion is being a teacher or a nurse. So your life's passion, that's not sexual and it's not romantic, but it's about the meaning of your life. In other words, it gives more life to have some grand passion for what you're put on earth to do. Another example is my passion project. Another example is the phrase crimes of passion, right? Those are about death, or the passion plays, or the passion of the Christ. That was not about a romance, it was about a death, the death of Christ. So the word passion codes to just two things: either the sexuality within romance, procreation, reproduction, or life, or life and death issues. So, where do Freud and Darwin align. Darwin's known for survival of the fittest, also known as survive long enough to reproduce. So survival and reproduction is the Darwinian principle, the evolutionary principle. So where do we arrive at with the word passion? Passion is exclusively about that which is instinctual, because the instincts cause us to survive, hopefully, and they also encourage us to reproduce. Survive long enough to reproduce. That's the instincts. That's the reptilian brain. So passion is living in the reptilian brain, nowhere else. They shouldn't call it the brain. They should call it the mind, though, because it's not about brain anatomy. It's about software packages. So that's passion. Intimacy implies sharing and communication, right? Getting to know somebody deeply, more than perhaps anybody else that they have known. And what's necessary there? Communication. And what's part of communication? Yes, data. But what's another crucial part of communication, perhaps even more important, certainly with elections and voting and things like this, politics, emotion. Communication is part data, part emotion. So intimacy, Sternberg's second um, variable, let's say, pertains to the emotions ultimately, the sharing of emotion, intimacy, communication. That's mammalian brained. I told you the triune brain model is the master model. And then commitment, what is that? Well, commitment is obviously conscious, and it's a synonym for partnership. So it's what we were talking about so far, um, right? Everything to do with how do we align resources, have similar goals that are yet diverse. We bring something different to the table such that both members of the couple can not only succeed at their mutual goals as a couple, which is actually a minority amount of the overall total goals. The majority are going to be personal individual goals for one partner and personal individual goals for the other partner. Otherwise, why be together? If we're going to pair up with somebody who's going to sabotage, wittingly or unwittingly, sabotage our life's mission or purpose, who would do that knowing ahead of time? Then we get into topics on narcissistic abuse and kind of the fraudulent bait and switchy way that very narcissistic people can wrap us into a contract uh, to partner called a marriage license, and then bait and switch it. Um, that's kind of the dark side there. But commitment has got to offer mutual achievement of mutual goals that we come up with together. Where do we want to retire together? Where do we want to go on vacation? How many children do we want to have? How do we want to raise them? But then each individual has their own personal goals too. And something about the partner ought to at least not interfere with that personal life's mission or purpose, or perhaps even enhance. Best would be if something about the other person enhances our very personal pursuit of unique life's goals. That's all built in, I think, built into this concept called commitment. So I don't know exactly what Sternberg's definition of commitment would be, but it's easy to see right there in those. It's a three-part model, a three-variable model, the same as Freud has three variables. I have the triune brain. Evolutionary psychologists have the triune brain, and I see those as like you know, uh, like the trunk, you know, branches and smaller branches of a tree, or three interconnected working general parts of psychology that have within them all other working parts. You can't really think of some other part that isn't included in the concept, the triune brain model, if you see it as a software of the mind kind of model. So that's my answer. So Sternberg was onto something, the same as Freud, the same as Darwin, the same as anybody that uses a three-part model of the mind. Uh, Aramis says, I recall your love of the triune brain. Yeah. I mean, it's not that I love it, it's that it's the truth, of how you can hang all the research that comes out fits into some branch of those three. Correction, passion with regard to Sternberg's theory, according to Aramis, equals sexual attraction. Sure. Yeah, maybe I didn't say enough about that. Um, Passion has been used to pertain to sexual attraction. It also has been used to pertain to that which gives life meaning to you, to be full of life. How these align are in, I think, two words. Regardless of your background, lifestyle, there's got to be some kind of polarity of the passions for you to have deep interest in another person, compelling interest in them. The two words I like to use, because it's good to just talk about what you know, not what you don't know, are the words masculinity and femininity, regardless of your background. You could give them different names, but they clearly work by different principles, because consumer purchasing um, experts know this well. I mean, they sell items to one or the other group of folks based on their passions. And I'm kind of giving away the answer by saying that. I believe that masculinity is simply masculine passion, whether it's applied to romantic interest or if it's applied to meaning in life, a feeling of being truly alive, full of life. What Freud called libido did not mean just sexual interest, it meant life force. How alive is a person? Epictetus said at one's death, the only question that should be asked is, did they have passion? Meaning, did they truly live? Were they full of life? I think that's what masculinity is for males, and what femininity is for females. Um, Speaking to, 90+% of the world populace. So that they're synonyms. Masculinity is a synonym for passion. Passion is a synonym for either masculinity or femininity. Both are synonyms for life force, Freud's libido, or even charisma. Those who are interested in what is charisma, what gives a person charisma, what is meaning. Those of you into existential philosophy and psychotherapy ask, where's the meaning here? Well, the meaning is where the passion is, or better said, the meaning is what gives rise to passion in an individual, regardless of their background or what you call it by another word. So, okay, Sternberg's theory equals sexual attraction. Passion is sexual attraction. Yes, true. But it is also meaning in life. It's charisma. It's truly being alive. More life to life. Geraldine likes that. Okay. Thank you, Aramis, for a link to Sternberg's theory. I will check it out. Um, Jeremy and I have talked a lot recently also about social exchange theory, which is also older, um, and especially Rusbolt's interpretation of social exchange theory, in which they did derive three variables that explain a lot about the stick-to-itiveness of partners in a couple. One is Is there is it enjoyable? Um, is it happy? Do the two people feel happy a lot of the time? Is there a majority happiness? Secondly, derogation of competition. In other words, the laws of supply and demand. If if you're a male with a female and you move to the island of Swedish bikini models, well, good luck. There's going to be a lot of stress there that occurs. Maybe it is harder to uh, have derogation for the competing um, female candidates. Or if you move to the island of Chippendales, same thing in reverse. So supply and demand, how available are other mates, right? And if you marry and take vows, I would assume a vow means you vow something like for life. You're vowing to derogate the competition for you um, as part of your vows. It's loyalty, right? But then again, we live in a world of Tinder and Bumble and things like this, Grinder, etc. Whatever your background. So there's potentially a billion candidates on tap, supposedly. So not good for Roosevelt second variable. The third variable is basically sunk losses. It's investment. How much have you invested? Have you mutually invested, as far as you can tell? Have you both invested? Um, or is it a one-way deal? Have you been doing all the investing, the other person hasn't? Well, then you're in for a great shock, perhaps, when the partnership reveals itself to not be so solid and you thought it was. It is on your end because that third Roosevelt variable of investment was heavy duty on your part. But what if the other person didn't put that much in? Labor, time, money. Money's real. Pay attention to money. Um, that's real value because it took hard work to get what you then invest, unless it was handed to you or you inherited it. Um, but yeah, soul, good listening, um, sleeplessness. That I mean, they're all kinds of soft, not accountable, not easily accountable parts of to investment, of course, too. But add all that up. Okay, so those are the three Roosevelt interpretive variables in social exchange theory. And I wonder if Sternberg is related at all to those or in the same field. Okay. Oh, Jeremy joined. Well, let me invite Jeremy on. Let's get a little further discussion. And we could go maybe another half hour or so. Okay. Let's call this the midpoint. So waiting for Jeremy to join. Let's see. Also, Aramis asks about attachment styles and how does that factor in? Yeah. Well, Aramis, I like that you introduce the Sternberg model. I mean, I like looking at all the models out there, right? If I ever find one that is accurate, yields data, repeatable, reliable, I'll compare it. In fact, it's what I've done for 20 years now on this model. I'll compare it for what already is built into this versus, wait a minute, I have not thought about attachment styles, for example. So I had to go through that too. That was not part of my original model 20 years ago. So the last 10 years, I have had to look heavily at attachment styles and what do they have to do with anything. I think they're reptilian brained. I think they are, well, they're imprinting phenomena. Um, Conrad Lorenz, right? I never paid attention to Konrad Lorenz in high school psychology because it was about infants and ducklings and mother duck bonding with ducklings, and who cares? I didn't care about that. I just, my eyes glazed over. But it turns out I never knew Konrad Lorenz, after discovering imprinting, went on to study for the rest of his life. Guess what? Human courtship. Isn't that interesting? It's not just child development or the attachment concept. He knew that there was something to attachment in adults, and then romance. He studied romance the rest of his life. I don't know if he made a model or not, but they never taught us that in school. And if you think about what the evolutionists say, hopefully Jeremy will join. He's invited. Um, if you think about what the evolutionists say about how um, there's it's all about instincts. I think evolutionary psychology, while it bills itself as pertaining to like all areas of the mind, every model of the mind tries to explain the entire mind. But I think it's most valuable in understanding instincts, right? I mean, it's baked into the name. Evolutionary means traits evolve, they're unconscious, they're animal. We could talk about any species, and a trait evolves that is expressed instinctually by an animal, and we are animals too. And if that is a valuable trait and it keeps individuals alive and enough people have the mutation, it helps the species and it gets built into the majority of the species till something else impinges upon it from nature. But it's still instinctual. It's all about the instincts. So let's see, what was I getting at with that? Oh, back to Konrad Lorenz and imprinting and attachment. Um, I view attachment just like what's unique about Konrad Lorenz imprinting and attachment. Atta- uh, Imprinting is like a big overarching. You may know this, Aramis, but it's an overarching term for all kinds of things that you could say relate to evolutionary psychology in that they are instinctual, but they are like a switch getting turned on. And as Lorenz said, imprinting is a behavior um, getting turned on, triggered. I'm paraphrasing. A behavior gets turned on only at the right time of development and under the right conditions. It's a really interesting way of saying it. A behavior gets turned on, like an instinct gets switched on, but only at the right time of development of the creature and under the right circumstances. And that is what you saw in the ducklings in the Austrian field, his family farm, following around Konrad Lorenz, thinking he was their mother. It's because he happened to walk along at their time of development where they needed to start following their mother duck, but she was not there and he was. So they start following him. And the right conditions were there because he maybe looked like a duck or he was walking, and that was the condition necessary. And it was summertime. Maybe it was a seasonal thing too. But what's fascinating is that very concept is how courtship works, especially in dating, the thing that was never studied until the mid 90s. Nobody studied it at all, not psychologically, and not with rigorous research. Nobody cared. Everybody was married, right? And then in the mid to late 90s, the Western world flipped for the first time from a majority married to a majority single people. Then you start seeing research come out. Then people finally in the late 90s say, guess what? Attachment isn't just for babies and mothers. It's actually between adults who have romantic interest in each other. And it's like this is miraculous and remarkable as a discovery. And everybody always knew that, but now it was solid science. And it owes a debt to Konrad Lorenz, because the imprinting idea, you could also include, besides attachment, you could include bonding, you could include introjecting of the same-sex parent, their identity, something of their nature, the Oedipus. And finally, I think there's a fourth imprinting phenomenon, which again, it took me 10 years to build this um, in steps 7, 8, and 9 of this courtship model. A fourth imprinting phenomenon comes from the world of anthropology and isn't mainstream psychology yet. And it's the idea of initiation. Initiation is a fourth imprinting. It's where the adolescent, hopefully adolescent, is trying to become a full adult, and they are tested by the village elders, in Aboriginal societies. Today, we don't have anything. Even high school and college graduation and marriage don't count. But I think what we do have today are our traumas. Our traumas are initiating experiences. They cause us to have to grow up, to have to solve a potentially deadly problem or just a daunting problem that has harmed us. And it initiates us into full adulthood. And how does it initiate us, and why is it imprinting? Because it forces us to pull out instinctual traits that defend or solve or champion something to solve a problem. It forces us to learn the instincts we never bothered to learn, which I think are masculine and feminine instincts. Regardless of who you are or how they work in you, there's three families of instincts, I believe. I believe there are masculine instincts, feminine instincts, and then general survival instincts. Loud noise makes you jump, right? Mountain lion chasing you makes you run or climb a tree. Or I don't even know if you're supposed to climb a tree if a mountain lion's chasing you, but I guess it would eat me. But I think there are three kinds of instincts. But those are what we are forced to learn quickly and utilize when we go through an initiating experience, which brings us into full adulthood by way of giving us a kinship with a non-familial group. For example, I feel kinship with other physicians. I just do, because of what I've been through, initiated into my profession. Same is probably true for you. Whatever your profession is, you probably feel some kind of kinship, or with your classmates at least. Or if you're in the military, you feel kinship with your comrades at arms. That's initiation. It gives you identity that's felt in the bones. It's deeply felt identity. So anyway, on a big long trail there. Oh, Geraldine, I don't know why you're not subscribed. I think you're lifetime subscribed to everything. It should let you comment. Um, yeah, Aramis says I used to talk about initiation when I was helping males, right? And I used that novel and many films, The Count of Monte Cristo, to demonstrate male initiation. Yes, um, but there is female initiation as well. It's whatever it is that you've never encountered before that challenges you, um, and feels just like high drama and very serious, maybe even deadly. Something you have to face. Something that feels like death to face. That could be a breakup that feels like death. It isn't literally, but it feels that weighty, or a new health problem, or a geographic move. Are you going to make it? Are you going to be okay? It's a heavy duty life transition or challenge that you'll handle better or worse than you would have wished. But either way, it's going to force you to grow into more maturity that isn't just lofty and conscious, it's also an understanding of the deep instinctual nature in you, parts of you you didn't know you had, for solving problems, defending, surviving, championing others and yourself. Aramis says, "Ha, yes, I'm in the med field, also in med school. I know what you mean." Okay, well there you go. Yeah, you're being initiated through a hazing. No matter what decade of medical education history we're in, it's hazing, it's abusive, um, it's hurtful and harmful on some level. You may be tougher or weaker against that, but it is what it is. And it's forcing you to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, solve problems with skills you didn't know you had, a strength, resolve, a hardness, a stoicism, or maybe a kindness it brought out in you. It's hard to say what it did, but it's forcing you to pull up unconscious instinctual skills that you haven't used or didn't know you had, and you're initiated into that group, that peer group. That's your new family. It's extra family. Your classmates, narcissistic though they may be, or cutthroat, or whatever they are, you're kind of tied to them in some way by way of the profession. It's like a village you have joined. It's a family that you have inherited now and you're part of. And you can be a leader, you can be a follower in that peer group, but you're doing it as an adult now. Okay. What else? Speaking of breakups, Aramis has gone through one recently and helping friends through it. So I've read a lot about it over the last 2 years. It does feel like death. Yes, it is a death. It's a death of a third person called the relationship. That certainly dies. It's a person, the combination of you two, parts of you two. Um, a question involved with how much like death it feels probably has something to do with how codependent was it. In other words, how over invested were you, or were they, in the relationship? I'm looking for a diagram. I'll just whip out the paperback books I have. There it is. That was easy. Okay. I don't know if you can see this, but there it is on page 293 of volume, or step 7, volume 1 of Human Courtship. But this diagram is showing two like a Venn diagram, two intersecting circles. Those are the boundary of person 1 and person 2 in the couple. What's shared between them is a shape called a mandorla, which means almond, and it's an almond shape, and it is the relationship. It's what they share. It's neither one person individually nor the other person. It's both of them shared. Notice the square area. This is perfect partnership. The square area, that mandorla, the shared investment and personhood, is less in total square area as compared with either individual. In other words, if you're in a perfect partnership, love relationship, or marriage, perfection is not giving 100% of you to the relationship. Perfection is giving something less than 50% of you, um, where the rest belongs just to you. But where together, it's very powerful if your virtues align, if you have a compatibility of character, let's say, and personality, and you already have sexual attraction or passion, you already have love, or emotional attraction. Now we're in partnership. You invest less than 50% of you to have a perfect partnership. Why? Because there always needs to be more of you to you than you given away. If you're in a narcissistic abuse situation, you might be giving away 99% of you and feel no identity left of your former self. So that overlap, that almond shaped mandorla shape in the middle for you might be more like a giant circle that almost eats up your whole boundary circle. So there's not much left of you to you that's just you for you. It all is being used by the other person, perhaps, or maybe both of you are doing that. So, why would it feel like death more so for some people than others? Those who are more codependent have more holes in their boundaries and weaker boundaries and give themselves away. Um, maybe to a more narcissistic person truly feels like maybe their own death of their own sense of self in that case. um yeah, EMDR can help for sure with narcissistic abuse. Best book that I can recommend, Aramis, you should get this right away if I haven't told you in years past. It's called How to Fall Out of Love, and it's about 40 years old, and it's updated, it's still quite valid. It's behavioral therapy by a psychologist named Deborah Phillips wrote How to Fall Out of Love. It's how to cut all those ties, codependent ties, to somebody who either doesn't treat you right or maybe just it never was right for you and it wasn't communicated. So How to Fall Out of Love. Aramis says she moved to another country, investment was equal, but now she's back. Do you remember your Carrie Mr. Big analogy back in the day? Yeah. Does feel like Romantopedia could be your magnum opus. Yeah, I'm certain it is. It took 20 years to write, and the last 10 heavy duty writing and researching and tying to existing research instead of just this is what I think. It's like footnote all through Romantopedia. Um, so yeah, Mr. Big and Carrie, Sex in the City, version one. Um, Carrie's chasing Mr. Big, trying to get him to marry her through 6 seasons, and then finally in the movie, he marries her. But the marriage is feels to him all about her, and his it I would uh, I would summarize saying he didn't feel honored, and honor is an interesting thing. You know, it could be defined all kinds of ways, like a code of conduct that you adhere to, that you stick to. But I kind of like defining it in a way useful to couples and individuals seeking personal growth. I think of honor as being retained value for past investment, or you could even say simplify retained value for good deeds done in the past. In other words, the opposite of pop songs like "What Have You Done for Me Lately," or "You're only as good as your last book. You're only as good as your last movie." Um, the last 5 minutes is all that matters. Or if you like it, you better put a ring on it. It's not honoring what have you invested so far in a person, and what have you invested in yourself to make yourself a candidate for love and for being with somebody else. We've kind of lost that sense of honor, both males and females. um so I won't say any more about that distinction between the two, but yeah, honor is I think for our use, retained value for good deeds done in the past or for past investment. It still is of worth. It still lasts. Aramis says something about them lacked character maturity, so they needed to break up and grow parts of their character that were lacking. Yeah, they're talking about Mr. Big and Carrie. Yeah, he walked away from the wedding, left her at the aisle, um, and walked away from the wedding for various reasons. She needed to grow, he needed to grow. Although I would argue that he had kind of a solid, from what I could tell, solid sense of identity in what he was looking for and was not finding it for all that time. The reason he delayed so long is he couldn't commit. People always talk about this old phrase, commitment phobes. That's just a playground bully terminology to try to manipulate somebody into doing something you want. If somebody doesn't commit to anything, to any specific thing, a marriage, a job, helping you move, meeting up with you for dinner, if somebody ghosts you or doesn't, quote, commit, it's because the terms were not good for them from the get-go. That's why they didn't commit. People will commit to that which looks like it's going to be enjoyable and mutually beneficial, hopefully, if they're not a narcissist. They want to be, they want to receive something in relationship, but they also want to give they have something to give that they don't have a place to give it if they're not in a relationship, a good person. So there's no such thing as a commitment phobe. In other words, there are just poor terms for one or the other party that need to be discussed or maybe abandoned. That's what I think. Okay, we have Ivan. At some point, Jeremy was in there. Jared, thank you for being here. Jared's stand-up guy from Chicago. Look forward to seeing you and saying hi in a few weeks. Jerome, the Frenchman, I believe, who maybe once went and saw a monument or statue. I remember like a decade ago him writing me. I think it's the same guy. He saw the Count of Monte Cristo, something about Count of Monte Cristo. He saw a statue, a monument. Yeah, fruity. Uh-huh. Right. Huh. Well, let's see. We put in over an hour here. Why don't I start to wrap things up? Aramis has one more thing. Says, I don't mean to hog the chat. Others, please feel free to contribute. Sure. I'll probably do it this way every other week. I think moving forward, this works. And those of you who are upgraded members, we also have ways of, connecting over uh, a Zoom style video, separate office hours. I'm recalling all this from memory. Your original article. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Aramis followed me on Psychology Today. And I had a generalized blog with them for, I don't know, 15 plus years now, and called The Urban Scientist. I don't know why I called it that, except I like cities. And they more recently a couple years ago, gave me a new blog for males, since it's kind of a new uh, division of psychology. It's like the newest branch studying male psychology or men's psychology. And the name of that blog is called Of Minds and Men, instead of Mice and Men, Of Minds and Men. So that's at Psychology Today. Substack is the place to be, however. All right. Well, I see Jeremy kind of somewhat on there. Maybe he doesn't want to come on. I'll give him one more invite chance here. We're kind of at the end though. That's okay if you can't. So yeah, I look forward to interviewing some folks upcoming weeks and months. Natalie Martinek, I will look forward to talking to and interviewing. There are a bunch of other folks I have in mind as well, possibly Dr. John Barry at University College London. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey,
Hey,
yeah.
what's up? Go
I
ahead.
heard
Yeah,
the ending. That's okay.
yeah.
You can end
Sorry to
it.
disturb you so late where you are. Um,
No,
but
it
yeah,
is
we
what it
talked about
is.
a lot of stuff. Somebody
Yeah,
was talking about Sternberg's model of human courtship. Have you heard of that?
yeah. Of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. How's that, in brief, how's that contrast with um, social emotional theory and Rusbolt? Or is it
Um,
totally different?
yeah, yeah. I mean Sternberg's model I enjoy for the just that consummate love element. I mean, it's about passion, intimacy, and commitment. So uh there's really more of a factor approach there rather than an actual ingredient list of, I mean, it gives you the three big factors there of passion, intimacy, and commitment. It doesn't really, I'm sure his work gives you a guidebook for it and
Yeah,
more ingredients for it, like how to reach that. But I think when you talk about Roosevelt stuff, it lays it out in a lot more detail about the transactional elements. And so it's
yeah.
more like about how to
It's how
reach
to.
something.
More
Yeah,
how to,
versus
right?
how it
Sternberg is
balances.
less how to. It's more this is what to look for. These are the ingredients. It's the
Yeah, it's like a
general.
categorical taxonomy of what your relationships are versus more of a taxonomy of um, investments. And I mean, so Roosevelt's model really goes all in on more behavioral rather than characterological, I would
Uh-huh.
say, which is
Okay.
probably useful for, I mean, it's the difference between a more analytic view versus a more behavioralist DSM view. So if somebody, I mean, tomato tomato, I think Roosevelt's definitely going to be more instructive for people now in the 2020s, for kind of how to get there, um, what to do to
Yeah.
actually, and you could probably put different mechanisms of Roosevelt's model and fit it into what element it fits in with Sternberg. So it could be, well, the intimacy elements, like building that,
Yeah.
is probably um, something to do with ridiculing alternatives because you're choosing to build that intimacy more with your partner than to extend that outward to someone else.
Yes.
Um, and like you need to invest in your relationship and develop the liking for the person through investments, and you could look at that element, like how a relationship can't just be on infatuation alone. It has to have actual practiced date nights and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you could probably overlap it a lot. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
what I would wonder why the questioner, like the questioner really likes one of them or finds that it's more useful in their own dating life or something.
Well, I think they asked it because they're I believe they're in medical school. They're psychologically informed. They read books. Um, they used to study my early work like 15, 20 years ago. Now they're back because I'm back. And they saw my description, most recent description of my model as having
Yeah.
three parts, really the same three parts, labeled differently: sexual attraction, emotional attraction, intellectual attraction, or reptilian brain, mammalian brain, higher brain, or dating, boyfriend, girlfriend, marriage.
I think you have to. quickly get to the intellectual attraction now if you're trying to do any kind of successful dating now, or you're going to end up kind of in the cycle, in the spin cycle
Mm,
of the
yeah,
reptilian stuff. You probably need
yeah,
to try to bootstrap that as quickly as possible. Like, get the person to see you as a person would be the biggest advice I could ever give, is get out of the
uh,
box as quickly as you can. And
yes,
so you'll see people do that in movies. You see different characters who are smooth talkers and really good at it, and some of the people are hollow, and some of them are real,
yeah,
like
yeah,
are not just con artists and are actually um three-dimensional people. So, but no matter what, you have to do that. You can't be boring. Not an option. Let's see. Well, I've been in LTRs over the past few years, so I'm not unaware. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, that's
yeah,
good. That's probably a good way to do it. So,
yeah. All
yeah.
five are in person. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Aramis had 5 long-term relationships, all met in person, not online dating. So that's good. I would kind of put a period on the sentence. I don't want to overstay my welcome or overkeep you here, but you talk sometimes about traditional lifestyles, marriage, things like this, Christian community. And I was thinking in talking to Aramis about how Roosevelt second factor, derogation of competition or ridicule of competition, is important and proven to be a major pillar of staying together in a partnership. But if we have online dating and that's billions of people to choose from, does that just blow everything up for humanity in terms of romance? And it occurs to me maybe the only way to get around that and still have derogation of competition and ridicule of competing suitors would be to be ardently and solidly in a belief system that maybe could be a religion or maybe something else,
Yeah.
where you conduct yourself in a certain way and you highly value and honor someone who has already invested in you.
Sure, I agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I guess, that's one way, one
No,
thing to
I agree
do.
with that completely. It's Rusbult, Aramis. It's Rusbult. That's the, let me see. Oh yeah, Rusbult. That's the model. I mean, yeah, you have to decide. I mean, if you want to be coldly calculating, you could say, is it worth it to risk everything and lose everything to try to optimize? And if it
Hmm.
is, then you probably don't care that much. And if it's not, then you probably do, and it's a good partner. So there you go.
Yeah,
That would be how I would put that. Yeah, it's an
yeah.
interesting model. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay.
I would say I would say it is better to dare to do, and I think it's the manifest destiny of our brain structure and species to pair up with one person if you can. I do think it's our manifest destiny. I don't think it's to be polygamous or serial monogamous. It's to find the one soulmate person. I really believe that. And I am a romantic, but I also believe that to be true. But the the real key is you've got to screen like crazy for somebody far more narcissistic than you, because you won't see it coming.
Sure.
If someone's very manipulative, you won't
Yeah.
see it. You'll be in it and it'll be too late. I think it's the most
Right.
important screening aspect if you want to try for a lifetime with one person. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. That's a good
So
point.
yeah. All right. Well, Aramis, thank you. Jeremy, thank you. I'm sorry it was right at the end, but super valuable anytime we get together, anytime you show up. And it's been a few weeks, so I'm glad to talk to you.
Yeah. Cool. I agree.
All right.
Technical stuff, I guess. All right.
All right. Well, let's talk again soon.
Yeah.
All
Absolutely.
right. All right. Thank you guys.